think of a general counsel, I think of a CEO that touches every facet of the business,
Yeah.
whether it be engineering, design, marketing, sales, and the gamut keeps on going, right?
Yeah.
So HR.
Yeah.
So within that role, was that your day-to-day at Yeezy?
Yeah, very much so. And like, Yeezy was still growing, so we didn't have every little role filled, so there were times where you had to, just as any startup might, and it's weird to think about Yeezy as a startup because, Kanye had an infrastructure and a vision that like most startups don't have, like doors opening for, just anything you would imagine being possible, we could make it happen. But at least in the day-to-day of the business, there would be a number of things that I would have to work on, and I can't get into detail about too much of it, but general counsel really has to know what every aspect of the business is doing, and if you don't, you're exposing the company to potential liability. So if your designers are making things that infringe upon other people's intellectual property, if your manufacturers are making things that maybe not be in compliance with certain regulations, if your own intellectual property is not buttoned up, if your employees are not given the right agreements, if they're not compliant with wage and hour laws, whatever it is, you have to have your hand in almost everything. And that's the role of a general counsel, is really to understand the business. And the weird thing for me was, before I even got to Yeezy, I felt like I knew the business, because as a fan, as like a sneakerhead, like I knew everything. Like I knew when the drops were coming out, like I knew what releases were to look forward to. I knew like what patterns were on our clothing, like what graphics we had used. So like walking in, the designers were like, bro, like you are like the perfect guy for this, And it was weird for them because they're looking at a lawyer like, oh, this is gonna be a stuffy guy. But this was what I was built for. I really felt like that. And so the transition was a lot easier, as opposed to going into a company that maybe was in a different vertical that I was not so knowledgeable about. Like, I don't know, pharmaceuticals, right? Like that's just not my thing, So, and I may have represented some over the years in a small capacity, but I was all in. Like I was a streetwear guy from day one. So like this just made sense.
So when I think of Yeezy, I think of like the ultimate direct-to-consumer brand, company. But like you said, doors are opening really easily for the brand as you guys maneuvered. But one thing Kanye identified when he was first trying to get this thing started, or at least removing himself from Nike to Adidas, is that as a celebrity, he gets taxed. Like everyone's coming at him, trying to get the most out of him. But when he entered into Adidas, it seemed like he found a family, found a home for the Yeezy brand, which had me, from a direct-to-consumer model, working through Adidas, I was wondering, is Yeezy structured as a separate company? As a brand?
Sure. So I can't really speak to the entity and how it was structured, because there's just confidences there that I can't speak to, and I was the guy that wrote our NDA, so it would be pretty bad if I was going into those details. But what I can say generally is, like, typically the way a company would be set up that would work with a brand like Adidas is you would either have a separate entity and you would license your intellectual property to Adidas, like you would license your mark like Yeezy or Assad or whatever it is, you would license that mark to Nike, to Adidas, or you would have a brand underneath the umbrella of Nike and Adidas, and they would take care of all that for you. Obviously, you would have a bit more leverage if you did the former setup than the latter, because you would have more control over your IP, you would have more control over your company and your setup and the day-to-day operations. But there's all different forms and shapes of a licensing agreement, of a brand endorsement agreement. So there's really no one cookie cutter model. And I think what we're seeing today, and what's really important for designers to know, is that depending on your brand and your ethos and your aesthetic and how you set it up, there's really ways that you can skin this cat to make the best endorsement deal for you if you have that leverage, right? Obviously, Kanye came in with a tremendous amount of leverage and cachet, like coming from Nike and being able to say, no, I'm gonna walk away from this to go to somewhere where I think it can be the right fit for me. Not every designer has that, ability, but there's just so many ways, and I think designers are inherently creative. They need to be thinking about how they do their partnerships creatively.
No, I totally agree. And that really speaks to the heart of the conversation today around how designers can start moving into a business-minded forefront and thinking direct to consumer.